Hi, this is Darren Freeman, and you're listening to the Fulham Focus Podcast.
Fulham.
Hello, yes, a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening to you, however you may be listening and wherever you may be listening. This is the Fulham Focus Podcast coming to you after what was quite an incredible night of football at Craven Cottage. The whole script and the whole tone of this podcast, let's just say it went through a couple of tweaks before we hit the record button for tonight. But before that, let's just get the formalities out of the way. And we first like to thank Darren Freeman for opening the show. Darren made 51 appearances for the Whites, scoring 10 goals. He was an influential character in the famous Mickey Adams side and was the type of player that got bums out of their Riverside seats and made those of us standing in the enclosure and the terraces equally excited. After sequences of injuries, Darren's Fulham career was cut short as the club pushed on with no room for sentiment and now fired. That strikes a bit of a tone for what happened last summer, but anyway. But Freeman showed the heart to rise again and became as much a Brighton hero as he is a Fulham one. Listen to Danny Boy's Q&A with Freeman on our website, www.fulhamfocus.com. Mr. Freeman, we salute you.
Fulham.
Right, and let's start off the night by introducing our panellists for tonight. I'll go in geographical order, and assuming my geography lessons are correct, we'll first go to Mr. Matt Domm, calling all the way from wherever it is he's living, but at least he's UK-based. Domm, a good evening to you.
Good evening, mate. How are you doing?
Good. Grand. Very, very much grand after the result that we had, which we're about 30 seconds away from discussing. So hold on to your hats. And then from an even further afield, across the North Atlantic Ocean, it's Mr. Matt Lampitt, coming all the way from Kansas City. Matt, a good evening to you.
Good evening.
Good.
How are we
I have
doing?
no idea. Is this your first appearance on the podcast? I'm not 100% sure.
This is my debut.
This is your
What a
debut on
time.
the podcast. Oh, what a night. What a night. To make your
Getting
debut.
back.
We need to have you
Get
on
him
more
back.
often.
Indeed.
We need to have you on more often, and this is the kind of stuff we can expect. Right, in which case, let's just crack on straight into it. You can tell how excited I am. Fulham 4, Brighton 2. We'll start from the beginning, and then I'll just hand it over to you for you guys to just go mental over it, as I'm sure you've been waiting. When was our last win? Huddersfield? However long you've been waiting to get its emotion out, I'll hand it over to you. But first, Matt, I want to start with you, mainly because you were the one that sort of gave me the idea for this. When the team first came out and you saw that there were no changes from the Tottenham side, which, by the way, I forgot what our last game was. It's been so long. I've completely zoned out and got mixed up with the whole FA Cup weekend off thing. But anyway, an unchanged side from the side that started against Spurs. What were your initial thoughts when you saw that lineup come out?
Well, I mean, we've been crying out a lot of this season for consistency in the lineups. So we had that. But the problem was, again, we're at home in a game that we must win. Much like Huddersfield, he's opted for 5 at the back, which, like you say, consistency is one thing, but I'd like to have seen something a bit more attacking. I know it's Ranieri's style to sort of sit back a bit in the first half, try and keep it tight, and then open up in the second half. But I wanted to see us go for it from the start, really, and that didn't work out. And credit to him, he made a change early on, which did work out. But next game, I think we're going to have to stick to much more like the lineup that finished the game tonight.
Yeah, exactly. We'll get on to the whole changing of the formation, changing of the personnel in a couple of minutes. But Mr. Lampitt, same question to you. When you saw the starting lineup and saw that it was the same starting 11 starting against Spurs, which did okay, held out for what was a decent-ish result for 90 minutes, and then just momentary lapse of concentration, let Harry Winks get the winner. But starting lineup the same as it was against Spurs. Did you think that was the way to go, or did you think initially, hang on, no, he's got this wrong?
So I thought if we started the way we did against Spurs in the first half, I thought definitely I wanted to see the way we started in the first half, how we would do against Brighton, because you have to just think that we're going to produce possibly the same, same high tempo, good defensive organization. We did it against Spurs. Surely we can do it against Brighton. Unfortunately, it all fell apart. We had too many players back. We instantly retreated. As soon as we lost the ball, we go back into that shell. And it wasn't how we played against Spurs. We didn't put any offensive pressure, and it just ended up being our downfall. We got confused. First goal, Brian doesn't know when to step. Ream is backtracking with him. It's just complete calamity in defense, not how we played against Spurs in that first half. I was excited to see the same lineup, but in the end, an adjustment had to be made. And like you said, credit has to be done to who decided to make that change.
Ryan, I suppose that change sort of gets us onto, because we had so few positives. I really want to focus on that tonight rather than negatives. So I'll just brush over the negatives. A very poor start by Glenn Murray, who will forever, until the day he retires, be one of our bogey striker for us. Hopefully we won't have to face him too many times. Again, I don't want to get into the whole, should the defence have marked him up better? We've had too much negativity. Let's get on to the positivity. But it did all start from when Claudio Ranieri decided to change the formation, change the personnel, and bring off Tim Ream, and bring on Tom Cairney. Mr. Domm, I'm assuming you have to applaud the decision somewhat because it paid off. But were you somewhat confused, or did you sort of think, hang on, because it was about 25 minutes in he made the substitution. Did you think, you mentioned consistency. Do you think it's a bit early to make the change now? Or were you saying, right, yes, that's a good idea?
Yeah, well, I mean, credit to him for making the change. But as I said in the WhatsApp group, when I saw the lineup, this was a game I think was really crying out for Tom Cairney from the start. We know the way Brighton play, it's sort of two solid blocks of four. They sit back, they make it hard to break through. And lining up against them with five at the back, that wasn't really going to create many chances for us, I thought. And Tom Cairney, the way he plays, in the whole number 10, he can bring defenders towards him. He can pass in a tight space. It was really needed him to play, and when he came on, he really turned it around into our favour. Not so much in the first half because we were quite poor for the rest of that, but in the second half, and he played a bit closer to Mitro, I thought, and he really pulled the strings, and he has to start, doesn't he, next time, surely?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, again, we don't want to latch too much about talking about next time because we're going to get on to Crystal Palace later on. But Matt, Mr. Lampett, rather, this whole Matt's thing is going to get very confusing. So hopefully we don't make too many more mistakes by the end of the night. Mr. Lampett, sort of same question-ish to you. There's been a lot of conflicting talks about whether or not people think, Seri and Tom Cairney can play together somewhat. Did tonight sort of disprove that fact and the fact that they can play together in the same side, or do you think it's just taking advantage of Brighton aren't exactly the best side in the league, so maybe we got lucky, maybe their style of play helped facilitate the fact that Seri and Cairney played well together, or was it a combination of the two?
I think it's based on the combination of the two, that they did sit back, but at the same time, what a lot of people think is when in the past, when Seri and Cairney have played together, they've kind of played conflicting roles. But today was the first time that I actually saw Cairney be more of a free roam. He not only went from side to side, he also went, like you said, up like Domm said, up by Mitro, and then he came back. And instead of Seri pushing up, Chambers is the one who pushed up. So it's not necessarily Seri and Cairney, it's more so Cairney and Chambers that kind of changed their positions multiple times, and you saw Cairney be able to spread out the length of the pitch, which allowed Christie to overlap. It really did look, I'm not going to say it's Silvisa's Fulham, but it did look quite similar in how we were able to dominate that defensive third of Brighton, and we just basically clogged that middle of the pitch. Every single 50-50 ball, we won it, and that's a product of having sure ball handlers, near the top of the box and in the defensive third, with Seri dropping back and Chambers and Cairney playing off each other. Overall, I think that's where is a lot different than where it's been when for example, when Slavisa came in with the 4-2-3-1 or the 4-3-3. It's because Kearney and Siri were so close to each other, and they're such similar players on paper. That's kind of where I think the confusion set in. And I was also not sure of how Kearney was going to play, because again, he ended up on that right hand side, and there's been many discuss about him being on that right hand side. But this time he actually was able to roam to the center, roam backwards, but also play closer to Mitro. So I feel like there's something different there. And I also noticed in the second half, Kearney took the armband, and he definitely had a captain's performance at the end of the day.
Yes, exactly. There seemed to be a little bit more leadership. We've been crying out for leadership. Some people have questioned whether or not Tom Kearney has it this year. Should it go to Mitro full time? Should we bring back Kevin McDonald? He seems to be the quote unquote real leader in the changing room. Rumors that he's going to be on the way out. We won't discuss that. But Mr. Domm, coming back to you, and as it seems, you seem to be the main guy on the much coveted and much wanted to be into Fulham Focus WhatsApp group. And I want to bring something back to you. I shall quote word for word here from 21-26. Mr. Lampit talked about bringing back to Slavisa's style of football. And talking about styles of football, you said this: I wonder if this is an FU Claudio, we're playing football now moment, a la Hughes away to Stoke. Just sort of divulge a little bit more further on that. Just sort of get everyone that's listening into the mind of what made you think about that. Because Mr. Lampert did say there did seem to be a very, very different change in style of play, and it can't all be down to the manager, because there's only so much he can get across.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a little bit of heat of the moment in that comment, but if you remember back to when we did have Hughes, we had a really poor start and we were struggling for a long time. And I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken, it was the game away to Stoke where it really started to click. And there was talk after that the players I think Danny Murphy was one who said it, that the players got together and said, you know what, these tactics aren't working for us. Let's play football the way we used to. And from that point on, things really looked up. And in that second half today, it wasn't Claudio Ranieri football, was it? That's what made me think about that, because even when we went 3-2 up, I was thinking, oh, here we go. He's going to ask us to sit back like we did against Spurs, and that will be the mistake. In fact, that's the mistake Brighton made today. But we carried on. We wanted the ball. We kept passing it around, the passing and the movement, and they couldn't keep up with us. And I just wonder how much of that was Ranieri telling them to play like that, and how much of that was, do you know what, this is our last chance. If we lose this game, we're done for. We need to do anything to win, and let's play football the way we know how we can. That's kind of just what my thinking was behind that, really.
That's lovely. Perfect. I more or less agree with every single word you say. Do you think that this now, again, I don't want to talk too much about going forward, but just sort of elaborate on the point you just made, and I'll go over to you first, Mr. Lampit. Do you think that this now changes the way that we approach games going forward? Do you think Claudio Ranieri now looks at it and think, right, defensive-minded isn't going to, because in his one of his introductory press conferences he mentioned how I'm Italian, the first thing and the most important thing is a clean sheet. So do you think he's going to move away from a defensive style of football, 5 at the back, try and get the clean sheet first, and move more to a more attacking style? Let's get 2 goals, and then similar to what was happening under Jukanovic, we're going to concede, fine, but we're just going to outscore you for the rest of the season. Do you think that's what he's going to do, or do you think this was just a momentary one-off for this game, spur of the moment after half time? How do you see this going forward?
I think he has to build off of the momentum that's been created here, and that's really important, because I feel like when he had us 5 at the back and this 3-4-3 shifting to basically a 5-3-2, and having that as the focus was a fundamental that he probably felt like we needed, because we conceded so many goals. Okay, let's slap the Band-Aid on it and say, all right, 5 at the back. If he could, maybe he'd put 6. But regardless, he puts in 5. And now the fundamental is, okay, we're a defensive-minded team. This is what we're going to do. The reality of it is it actually allowed us to sit back more and absorb, even more goals and more terrible types of goals coming, corners or crosses from the opposite side and scoring from the other side. So I feel like he has to build off of this momentum, and something we need to do as a team is, we've got fantastic players on paper that a lot of people say we do, and we have to let them get creative. And I think Domm does make a good point about, we basically played our football. And, who knows if it was down to the coach or not, or, if that's Ranieri's new style, but, he is the Tinkerman. But I feel like this is something that we have to keep pushing forward. The more we have possession, I think we had like 60% possession or 50, something like that. And we had 24 shots total and 15 on target. That alone is something we haven't reached in quite a long time. And that's something, even when we're chasing matches, we don't have that many shots somehow. And having that many shots on target, usually that's more. 15 shots on target is more than we get as a total. So we have to build off of that. We have to keep getting men into the box, and we can't do what we did in the first half, where we're just dropping as soon as we lose the ball, and we don't know who's going to step and who's going to take the man in cover. I feel like this is the time where, like I said, we have to build off of this momentum. We go to a 4-3-3, 4-2-3-1, something. No more. I think there's the death of the 5-3-2, the 3-4-3 shift. I feel like it's just now time to move on, and let's just get more goals. That's all I can say.
Indeed, and speaking of goals, you brilliantly moved on to what my next point was going to be, and that's been the outstanding contribution, all season, but particularly tonight. We're talking about players, Claudio Ranieri again gave in his press conference, players who want to fight. We've all said that we want players who want to fight, show a bit of effort. We don't mind if we lose, as long as you can see you putting the effort in. And I think we need to sort of dedicate the next 5 minutes, or however long it's going to take, just dedicate the next couple of minutes to Alexander Mitrovic, who played outstanding tonight. In a game like this, and in a situation like this, he is exactly the sort of man you want, and it's been something we've been screaming out for, and we probably haven't had all that much, and that's put the ball in the box, let him win the header. And we need to give credit Joe Bryan particularly for the second one. Fantastically, perfectly placed ball. It's what we had it last year. Balls being floated into the box, Mitrovic to battle, win the header, win and get the goal. It's been something that we haven't really seen all that much this season. Mr. Domm, again, just give me your love for Mitrovic, because as much as everyone seems to want to praise Mitrovic, there will be praise for many players tonight, but Mitrovic, I think, was pretty standout for the team tonight.
Yeah, it's been. We all know it's been a pretty tough season so far, but I think we can agree the real highlights have all revolved around Mitrovic. Absolutely loving the time at the club, and the last few games you've seen on the pitch, things haven't been going his way, and his head's gone down a little bit. But tonight, that second half was absolutely dominant. I mean, he made Lewis Dunk look average, and Lewis Dunk is far from an average defender. But do you know what it was? He had that extra few percent of commitment to win those headers, and that's sometimes all it takes. He was his first goal, I think it was in particular, where there was fists and heads flying everywhere, but he made that his, and that's what he brings to the team. As you say, there's crosses coming into him. I think it's been a long time since we had quite so many crosses, I think, and it reminded me of last season when we had Matt Targett and Joe Bryan in the second half. He didn't get to the byline quite so much, and his crosses were coming in a bit deeper, and that sort of hanging ball is what Mitrovic really thrives on. So yeah, it was just a wonderful performance, and what better than seeing how much Glenn Murray was loving life in the first half, and for it to completely turn around, and for it to be Mitro the one at the end who was lapping up the applause from the crowd. It was just amazing, and absolutely one of the best half of the season, I think.
Yeah, Mr. Lampert, your turn now for the Mitrovic Appreciation Hour. Just give me all you got.
Absolutely. He's man of the match, and he had 2 goals, and he could have an assist with Siri hitting the post there. It's exactly what we wanted from him at Spurs, against Spurs, because he was not isolated in this match. Babel definitely played off him, but Mitro held off Dunk. and he stayed more central in where he was holding him off and able to find passes backwards. I think that's another benefit to having that extra man in the midfield, in that center midfield, and that's something that Mitrovic thrives on, because little passes into him where he can get his feet on the ball. And then the goals. I mean, the first goal, like Domm said, was just all effort. No, that ball was just hanging in the air. Anybody, the keeper could have gotten it, Dunk could have gotten it, but Mitro comes out of nowhere and barrels over all of them and scores. And then the second goal from Brian, finally, just sending in a really nice cross that Mitro had to generate all that power. And then, of course, Mitro had more chances. He had the chance where he was 1-on-1 with the keeper, couldn't find it, and managed, I think it was Dunk or somebody who deflected the ball off of him, and he almost scored a little looper. Could have, just sealed the win. I could hear that Ranieri probably wanted us to go to the corner flag at the 87th minute, but we still try to pile it on, going through Mitro. And it just was unrelentless pressure. And at the end of the day, that's what we want. And we don't want him isolated, but we want him to put in individual performances like that. And this was exactly the match he needed and we all needed.
Indeed, and one final. I want to keep talking about this as long as we can, because we never know how much, how many more of these positive nights or afternoons or mornings, however you're listening, we may get. So I just want to take the turning point of the season, and someone who's probably put in a very good shout for, along with Alexander Mitrovic, a big shout for player of the season. That's Callum Chambers. We've talked a lot, or there's been a lot of talk, with Alfie Mawson, his injury, how long that's going to keep him out for. But I think it's pretty much fair to say that Callum Chambers is not going to be going back to centre back anytime soon. And again, I give a lot of credit to Callum Chambers for you talk about what's the ideal time to score, and that's right after the halftime whistle, right before the halftime whistle, but right after works just as well. Do we see him maybe even playing even further afield rather than defensive midfield? If we're going to have to talk about a change of formation, do we see him pushing further up the field, or do we want to see him more in that defensive midfield role, just in front of the back four, rarely venturing forward? Because he's shown that he can get on the score sheet a couple of times this season. Mr. Domm, over to you first.
No, I think predominantly he needs to stay back. We saw today, and I think Matt Lampett mentioned it earlier. There's an understanding that's happening between him and Seri, and they both seem to know when to go forward and when to stay back. And Seri is the one who, gets forward and links up the play more than Chambers. But we've seen it earlier in the season as well. Chambers has got a bit of a shot on him, and there's been a couple of occasions where he's nearly scored. And yeah, he's very dangerous, predominantly being a defensive midfielder, but with a bit of license to get forward when he thinks the time is right. He's a real threat. And, I've criticised his passing before. I think that's something that's a bit lacking from his game. He panics a bit and overhits his passes, and he tends not to be able to find his man. But I think actually he deserves a lot of credit for his passing today, because along with Seri, he really kept things ticking over. So I think keep him mainly defensive, because he's really good at getting in the way of the ball, and that is something we really lacked, especially when we had Slavisa in charge. I think get him in the way, properly defensive, but with a bit of a license to get forward. Something like Dix Natuhu. I think there's some similarities there.
Yeah, absolutely. Mr. Lampett, same question to you. Where do you see Callum Chambers fitting into the grand scheme of things going forward, or do you just see it being carry on business as it is?
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with Domm, because he is that kind of holding midfielder who does have license to go forward, but the good thing about Chambers is that he knows when to go forward and when to stay back. And like Domm said, it's based on where Seri is, because Seri also likes to drop back as well. He's definitely grown into that role to be more aggressive than he's ever been compared to where he was at Ligue 1. But he's definitely got they've got that understanding. And when Chambers goes forward, Seri cuts in, tucks in middle and drops back. But then Kearney can also go wider. The nice thing about Chambers is that he's great, as we saw in the goal at the top of the box and having a shot on him. This was the perfect night to hit low shots. And of course, he scores a half volley. I don't know how high, I don't think it was upper 90, but it was a brilliant strike. And that's what we've been wanting all season. I've personally wanted our more midfielders to score, our center midfielders to score, because if you look throughout the league, there's a lot of center midfielders who have goals, and I think we only have Seri, who's the only center midfielder that has a goal for us up to this match. And it's important that Chambers has had multiple chances. Like Domm said, Chelsea comes to mind as probably the biggest one, and then of course Burnley with the header off the crossbar. It was bound to happen. And right when I texted on the WhatsApp group, as soon as he scored, I said finally, because that was something we desperately needed from Chambers, to see that he can score goals. And this is hopefully the start of something pretty special.
Indeed, right. And before we sort of move on to the quiz and all the other relevant parts of the podcast, I'm just going to throw it open to you. Was there any further points that either of you want to make? Any particular shout outs you want to give to any players, or maybe you want to go negative and talk about the 2 goals we conceded? I'll just throw it open to you. Any further points? Just go ahead and make them. Mr. Domm, over to you first.
Yeah, I think Sergio Rico should get a lot of credit for tonight. I know in the last pod I was on, we had started to question whether we all agreed, I think, that he's still our best keeper, but could he be doing more? I think for both the goals, there's not anything he could do. But before we went 3-2 up, he made, or was it when it was 3-2? I can't remember. But he made a superb save to stop Glenn Murray getting his hat trick. And there were a few later on as well, a few kind of big claims in the box. That's something I've questioned him for in the past, but he really made himself known tonight, and he deserves a lot of credit for that.
Yes, absolutely. I figured Sergio Rico wouldn't be too far away from a mention on here. I think the whole team did incredibly well. We're just trying to pick a few standout moments, but whoever's going to get the man of the match award, so that's going to be a hell of a one to pick. Mr. Lampier, final points, sort of over to you. Do you have any further points or any issues you want to raise about the game tonight?
Yes, the one that stood out to me, even though his touches were at times not great, and sometimes his passes, but we've criticized him before, but Cyrus Christie's crosses were pretty well sent in today. Of course, the conditions work for any kind of right back sending in low crosses, but he sent in some really good ones that some players definitely got on the end of them, and he showed he wasn't as bullied on that far side as he's been, but on top of that, he's gotten up the pitch so much higher, especially in the second half. It has to be commended, that he was just that significant outlet for us, and definitely just created some danger opportunities, just possession opportunities. But that's definitely one for Chrissy. And another one, of course, is Vieto. I mean, scoring his first goal finally. You can see how much that meant to him. He was just a pest all over the pitch, for lack of a better word. He was everywhere, connecting, and I think just hassling players and sure touches. He didn't look like the Vieto of Oldham against Oldham in the FA Cup, but he was just everywhere. And he had that shot, and that was that corner, and then that allowed Chambers to score. And then, of course, his goal was off of, it was before, where he had a sliced half volley that then set up Seri to hit the post, and it's just how funny it happened. And then, of course, he scores that header off of Babel's slight strike, and just a open header downwards, and just perfect. And like I said, you can see the relief on his face. And so, those two players, they needed this kind of momentum, and they needed, a good match like this for their own confidence. And, and I have to definitely appreciate that. And hopefully that continues going forward. And Vieto's a fantastic sub going forward, and, hopefully he can get some more goals for us. We need him.
Right, and that just about wraps up our thoughts for the Brighton review. Now it's time to look forward and go to the quiz.
Fulham.
And welcome back, and it's time for what is usually the best part of the podcast, but seeing as we're coming off the back of the win, it may be the second best part of the podcast, and that is the quiz, where we put our two Fulham experts up against each other to see if they can beat each other at better footballing knowledge and Fulham. And I'm just going to keep it on that. You know what? I'm in such a good mood tonight. I don't want to do that again. Let's just go with that as it is. Right, round one. And for those of you who've watched League of Their Own, you may know what this round is. So for those who haven't, I'll just give a brief outline. Basically, you're going to be asked to put these answers in an order, so 1, 2, and 3. You get 3 points if you get all 3 right, 2 points if you get 2, and then you can't get with just 1 because you'd have got the other, so on and so forth. Anyway, so it's either 3, 2, or 0. So you can't get 1. So anyway, right, so we're going to go for how many categories do we have here? We have 5. And by the way, as always, any complaints over this, send them Danny's way. I'm just asking the questions. He came up with them. So any issues, blame him. Right, so Mr. Lampard, you'll be going first on this. So according to Soccerbase and Danny Boy's Counting, he's specifically written that down. So specifically blame him. Which club has had the most managers in their history? And with a note, having the same manager more than once only counts as one person. So if a manager's gone, come back, so on, it's still only one. So it's different people rather than managerial stint. So because we've just played Brighton and we're coming up against Crystal Palace, it's going to be out of those 3. So between Crystal Palace, Fulham, and Brighton, who do you think, and I want you to put them in order, who's had the most managers in their history? Mr. Lampard, to you.
Okay, where are the teams? Fulham and Brighton?
Fulham, Brighton, and Crystal Palace. In order, so 1, 2, and 3. Who's got the most? Who's had the most managers?
Okay. Fulham 1, Crystal Palace 2, Brighton 3.
Okay, turns out you can get 1 point because you have got 1 point. I knew Danny should have made this a little more. I knew he should have explained this to me a lot better, or maybe I should have listened a lot better. Right, basically, Crystal Palace come first. They've had 52 managers.
Blimey.
Men being managers. Fulham have had 42, and Brighton have had 39. So out of that, Mr. Lampard, you get 1 point. Right,
on the
Matt
board.
Domm, you're on the board, exactly. You're in the lead. Let's hope you can keep hold of it better than Brighton did. Right, Mr. Domm, you get question 2. You get question 2. So which fixture has been played the most? Fulham versus Palace, Fulham versus Brighton, or Brighton versus Palace? Which fixture has been played the most? I'm assuming this is all competitions. Danny didn't specify, so blame him.
It's tough. I'm going to put Brighton Palace last. Fulham Brighton first, Fulham Palace second.
So hang on, say that again. So Brighton Palace last.
Yeah, I should have probably done it in order, shouldn't I?
Yeah, so give it to me in the order you want to have.
Fulham Brighton, Fulham Palace, and Palace Brighton.
I'm afraid you get 0 out of that because Brighton versus Palace has taken place the most. They've played 100 times. Fulham versus Brighton has been played 50 times, and Fulham versus Palace has been played 44 times. So you get 0 answers. You get 0 points.
Jeez, that wasn't even close.
It wasn't. But
Appreciate
anyway,
the charity
Matt,
points, Dom.
say again?
Oh, look at that.
That's some charity for me. I appreciate it.
Don't trust me. You do not want to give charity points. This is very fiery and feisty. That's the word I was looking for. Right. So, Mr. Lampard, back to you now for question 3. Which club has signed the most non-English players? So, out of the 3, who's signed the most non-English players?
Okay. 1 Fulham, 2 Brighton, 3 Crystal Palace.
So Fulham first, Brighton second, Palace third. You get 1 point for that because Fulham have come first.
Oh.
They have signed 291 for non-English players. Palace have signed 267, and Brighton have scored 230.
Oh,
so you get 1 point for you got Fulham first. You get the point.
All right,
so
Fulham first.
Keep it there. So you get that. Right, Matt Domm, over to you now for question 4. Who has had the most bookings in the Premier League this season? Now, this is before tonight's game. Who has had the most bookings in the Premier League this season? Same 3. Fulham, Palace, Brighton.
Oh, man. Glenn Murray gets booked all the time, doesn't he, I think? They're a bit filthy, Brighton, so I'm going to put them first. I'm going to put us second and Palace third.
Okay, out of that, you have got 1 point because we have had the most 39 yellow cards. Brighton have had 37 yellow cards and 3 reds. And Palace have also had 37 yellow cards, but only 1 red. So in Danny's mind, that puts them ahead. So it's Fulham first with 39, Brighton 37, then tied with Palace 37. So out of that,
39, 37, 37.
Yeah, exactly. But the way Danny's written it, because Brighton have had 2 more red cards, they come second. Work it out. And as always, blame him. Right, round number 2 is the back and forth round. So you get 5 guesses each. And seeing as this is the end of the transfer deadline window, either tonight, tomorrow, yesterday, last week, depending on how you're listening to this, we're going to be going through the top 10 Fulham transfer fees paid. So the top, because we had a couple of weeks ago, we had the top transfer fees received. So now we're going to go through top transfer fees paid. So Mr. Lampett, you shall go first. So you got the top 10 and you get 5 guesses each. So Mr. Lampett, record most expensive signings, top 10. Go. Who's your first guess?
Anguissa, I feel like.
Oh, sorry. You get that back. Sorry. This was before the summer of 2018.
Oh.
So forget Anguissa, forget Sarri. Sorry, I should forget Mitrovic. Sorry, I should have made that clear. This is before the summer of 2018. So Matt, you get to go again. Sorry, I should have made it clear. My bad.
No problem. Okay, let me think. I think okay, Sarri is one, and
before the summer of 2018.
Oh, 2018.
Before last
summer. Sorry. Okay. Mitroglou, I think is one.
Mitroglou is his first guess. Okay.
Yes.
So guess number 1. And you are bang on correct because he is our most expensive, coming in at 12.4 million. So Mr. Lampett gets 1 point for that. Now over to you, Mr. Domm.
Let's go for Brian Ruiz.
Brian Ruiz is his guess, and he gets a point because he comes in at number 4, coming in at £10.6 million. So, Mr. Lampett, back to you. You got another guess.
Van der Sar.
Edwin van der Sar. A good one, a very good one, because you've also got a point. He comes in number 7 at 7 million, coincidentally.
Ooh.
So, Mr. Domm, back to you. Guess number 2 for you.
Ross McCormack.
Ross McCormack, a very safe one, because he comes in at number 3, coming in at 11 million. Right, Mr. Lampett, over to you for guess number 3.
French guy. Marley, Stephen Marley.
Steve Marley comes in at number 2, so a point for you. That wasn't meant to rhyme. Don't give me any games. any. What a brilliant game show host he is. That was a guess. That was random. Right, Mr. Domm, over to you for your third guess.
AJ.
Andy Johnson, that's a good one because he comes in at number 5 for 10.5 million. So Steve Marley was 11.5 million. Anyway, right, number 4. You're winning through these very well, guys. So, Mr. Lampett, number 4, guess for you.
Has to be Rui Font, 9 mil, right? Rui Font.
Oh, good shout.
Yeah.
You get the point. You don't get it. Thankfully, you don't get it for the transfer fee because he's down here as 8.2 million. But you get the point. That's all that matters. You named him. That's all that matters.
All right.
Right, Mr. Domm, 4th guess for you.
Boy, I'm struggling now. Okay, trying to think of flop strikers. I think we've been through them all.
There's been a lot of them. You're going to be here a while. But I could give you a heads up. Bjorn Rundstrom is not on the list. I can give you that right now.
Okay. No, I'm really struggling. I'm going to have to go for, even though I don't think we paid a fee for him, Kacaniklic.
Alexander Kacaniklic is incorrect, I'm afraid, because I think he came in. I think we got him for free.
Yeah, I think he was part of
it was
Franceschi, wasn't he?
Yeah, it was Konchesky for Kacaniklic, Laurie Delavale. There was a player I really liked, and money. So anyway, Alexander Kacaniklic does not get a point. So, Mr. Lampard, your final guess. You've got 3 available to work with. You've got 3.
Who else? Now I'm trying to think of forward flops as well. How about I played with Dempsey and AJ. Diamante Camara.
Diamante Camara is on the list. He comes in number 8 with a cost of 6 million. So, Mr. Domm, you get the very last guess. Very last guess on this list.
It's another guess. I've got no idea if we even paid a fee for him. But Papa Diop.
Papa Diop is unfortunately not on the list. I shall run you through the top 10. Konstantinos Mitroglou comes in number 1, Steve Marley 2, Ross McCormack, Brian Ruiz, Andy Johnson, Rui Font, Edwin van der Sar, Diamante Camara. So you got the top 8 between the 2 of you. You got the top 8. Coming in at number 9 at a fee of 5.4 million was Abubakar Kamara.
Oh
no way!
I know. When I looked at this earlier, I was a little bit shocked at how high up the list he was. And then coming in at a joint 10. So really, you had 11 guesses, but for the sake of logistics, and I can't be bothered to go back and change it, you had 10. Steed Malbronk came in at 5 million. 10, and also Moussa Dembele. I'm assuming this first. Moussa Dembele also coming in at £5 million. So as we head into the final round, the guess the player round, Mr. Lampett is on 7 points, and Mr. Domm is on 4 points. So, Mr. Domm, you've played this round before. You know how it works. So you've got to go hard and you've got to go early.
I've got to guess first question.
If you've got to get a win out of this. So round 3 is my favourite. It's guess the player. And we're going to sort of change things up a bit because me and the other host, J-Mac, have been somewhat inconsistent with our scoring procedure. So we're going to have a set one from here on out. Basically, if you get it within the first 2, you get 5 points. Within answers 3 and 4, or clues 3 and 4, you get 4 points. 5 and 6, you get 3. 7 and 8, you get 2. 9 and 10, you get 1. That's how it is going forward. Hopefully, J-Mac sticks to it because I'm going to as well, for fear of for fear of the wrath of our boss Danny coming down upon me. Right, so and this makes it easier because you've got 2 different accents, so I don't have to pay that much attention to who's screaming out first. Right, so fact number 1 as we go for guess the player. Fact number 1, he is 6 foot tall. Okay, number 2, he made 152 appearances for Fulham, and only 4 of those were from the bench, so not starts. 152 appearances, only 4 of those were not starts. Okay, number 3. He never scored any goals. Number 4. He played 3 games during the John Tigana promotion season.
Oh, no.
You want to make a guess? This is
I'm
crucial.
going to have to, aren't I?
Well, you don't have to. You can play for a draw if you go for 5 and 6.
Yeah, I'm going to have to wait. I don't know.
You're going to have to wait. Okay, then. Fair enough. So, fact number 5. He was capped twice by France in the 1990s.
Stop. It's got to be Alan Goma, right?
Going for a guess of Alan Goma. Alan Goma is his guess. Okay, then. I shall make a note of whether you're right or not and come back to that later. Okay, we move on though, just in case for those of you who are listening at home who might not get the answer. Number 6, he was bought for £4 million in March. Doesn't give a year. £4 million in March before transfers were restructured into windows. This is back in the time when you could basically sign anyone at any time. Back in the glory days. Number 6, okay? So number 7, he retired in 2006 when we couldn't agree a new deal for him with the club. Okay, number 8. He has also played for Auxerre, PSG, and Newcastle United. Fact number 9. He is a centre-back. And fact number 10. Breda Hangeland, Aaron Hughes, and Zat Knight are the only centre-backs to play more games for Fulham in the Premier League. Mr. Lampard, would you like to cater a guess as well?
I'm drawing a blank. I got nobody.
Mr. Lampard draws a blank.
Yeah.
So no answer for him. So
Concede.
the answer is indeed Alan Goma. So out of that, Mr. Domm gets 3 points because he answered it on number 5, I believe it was. So that means at the end of the quiz, we have a draw at 7-all. So,
wow.
So Mr. Lampard sort of...
As an American, you were right with that, right?
But anyway, a very good effort from Mr. Lampard coming out. We usually give out a somewhat novelty gift after all this, but in such a good mood, I'm not in the mood. Everyone gets everything. Who I don't want to deprive anyone of not getting a gift when we have the gift of 3 points. So anyway, no one gets a gift, no one gets anything. 3 points. 3 points is the gift for everyone. Right, and let's keep this positivity going.
Any prize for that.
Swap any prize, indeed.
Especially the ones that we give away on this show.
Exactly. We probably need to. That needs to be the motto going forward. No more prizes when we win. Maybe that'll encourage the team to get more wins. But anyway, we've got one more thing left to do, and that's preview the Palace game, and that's coming up right now.
Fulham.
And welcome back. And it is time for us to preview our game against the team from the other end of the M23 in Crystal Palace. I don't suppose there's really much to talk about because we're going to get all the cliches from, I'm assuming from you two here discussing it and everyone on Twitter. It's basically going to be keep the same 11 that finished the game against Brighton, against Crystal Palace, and just play with the same mentality. Am I right? Am I right in thinking that's all we really need to discuss in terms of a preview? Mr. Domm, you first.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. We can breeze through all this unless Mr. Lampard has any changes that he wishes to make.
I agree. Same.
Yeah, exactly. So same mentality. Let's not keep the listeners for any sort of thing. It is more or less the same. Unless there's some major. Alfie Mawson makes some miraculous recovery from injury and maybe gets his place back. I suppose really the only thing left to do is we are talking about this, and we mentioned earlier, a couple of days before the end of the transfer deadline. So I suppose that's really where we should focus our previewing on. I think we're not going to focus much on the Crystal Palace game. Do you see us making any signings before the transfer window is done? Tony Khan has promised that he was looking at and making multiple signings. And at the moment, he's only come out with the one, and that's Ryan Babel, on the 6-month loan or buying for 6 months. I've forgotten what the particulars of it are. Don't really care at this point because we won. So if we're to believe what Tony Khan said, that there will be multiple signings, then that does give the indication that we should expect some business on transfer deadline day. Mr. Domm, do you expect anything on deadline day, or do you think that maybe this result against Brighton is going to be more? So long as we can keep that going, we don't really need anything to spoil the broth. We've got a settled team now. We don't need to go out and buy anyone unless Cristiano Ronaldo is going to suddenly say, "Yeah, I fancy playing 6 months by the river," sort of
thing. Yeah. I think the results made it a little bit tricky in that respect, because had we lost tonight, I think I've said it before, but I think we would have had to definitely go down the route of getting some championship players who will give us a chance and will fight for everything, but probably more likely will be happy to stay with us next year to get us back up. I'm wondering now the win, because it's moved us in Newcastle one, obviously, which doesn't help, but it has moved us slightly closer to safety. And I just wonder if, while there is still that shred of hope to cling on to, that they might look to bring in some more short-term deals. And I'm not saying that's necessarily the right thing to do, but I'm wondering if on deadline day because we know how many points we're going to be on now. On deadline day, we might bring in some similar to kind of Ryan Babel type deal. But we certainly, I don't think we should take the win as the fact we don't need to improve the squad anymore, because we're still really bad at the back, and that first half today showed that. So I think we need, if nothing else, a big commanding centre-back to come in. Interesting enough, we've been linked with Scott Dan recently, haven't we? And who has had a long injury and has fallen out of favour at Palace now because they've got to settle defence. I think he would probably improve us, so I'll be happy to go for that. But yeah, it's tricky. I mean, do we roll the dice and spend again and potentially go down and find ourselves in trouble, or do we play it a bit more cautiously?
Yeah, in fact, you've more or less set the answer. Asked the question that I was going to ask. In that, how does this change our approach in the transfer market? Do we now go for someone who's going to, players who are going to keep us in the league, or do we still maybe, not concede anything, but do we look more towards the type of player that's going to help us in the championship, whenever we go down? Does Mr. Lampett, does that result affect your views on the transfer market, or do your views remain the same? Should we expect any signings, or will we make any signings in the next coming 2 days?
It's tough because the result does skew a little bit, but I've never thought about going back to the championship. I know that narrative is definitely a strong one when you look at the table and you look of course, even looking at our first half performance, right? Everybody's thinking it, myself included. But realistically, I feel like we're going to get out of this, but there is something always in the back of your mind that it's just how it is. But I think if we sign somebody for the championship, that's just signaling, that's where we believe we're going to go. And it definitely felt like that in the first half of today's match. But I feel like we still need a quality center back, quality right back, perhaps, although I felt like Christie played well. But my focus is on where I look at our team, our lineup, and I see where our weaknesses are. It is the back line, in the sense of we don't have a very physical presence in that main center back role since Mawson's been injured, and I feel like that's something that has to be addressed immediately. As much as I'm a big fan of Adoy's athleticism and speed, I feel like he got outmatched quite a bit against Glenn Murray, as anybody does, but let alone against Glenn Murray. And I feel like we just need that size. We need a formidable player, if it's got to be from Ligue 1 or Serie A, or somebody who can play in Ranieri's hopefully changing system, if that's what it's going to be going forward. But I feel like I'm going to keep it as direct as possible that way. I'm not going to think about if this then that. I'm just going to think about, this is the result. This is what would have happened if we had a big center back, to kind of anchor the defensive side there. Hopefully playing in a 4-back versus a 5-back going forward.
Indeed. So the views of both Matts there sort of echoing the third back, because I'm more or less along the same line. If we are going to make any further transfer signings on deadline day or before deadline day, then the only real area of focus should be that commanding centre back. As both men put, I think that's the one area that we've struggled all season. And if we are to believe in Mawson, there's some reports that he could be out for the rest of the season. So as much as we did well tonight, I can't see us surviving for long with a back four of Christie, Adoy, Le Marchand and Joe Bryan. Fine defenders as they are, I can't see us lasting the rest of the season for him. So that's really what our main target has got to be, and what I think it's going to be. And that wraps it up for tonight. I want to thank you for listening, as always. Please don't forget to go on the website for all the fantastic stuff that makes Fulham Focus what it is. The excellent Q&As, the blogs, the articles. I don't know if Matt Lampett's doing, Mr. Lampett's rather, is doing one of his fantastic YouTube series coming up. Please tell me, is there one in the pipeline, Mr. Lampett? Because they were brilliant last time.
Yeah, we're definitely looking into getting those back in. Just have to, kind of get the footage and everything into play. But yeah, appreciate the shout on the YouTube. It's definitely, something we're always looking at improving on as best as I
Indeed, they were fantastic. That whole
appreciate
14
that.
thing, that whole 14 thing was a brilliant idea. I'm sure there's loads more blogs, articles, so on and so forth. This podcast as well. Go back and listen to past episodes if you so desire. I don't know why you would, but you never know. I just have to do it for the sake of legalities and make sure that Danny Boy keeps me in this hosting chair. But that's it. All that's left for us to say is thank you once again. Thanks very much for listening. It's a goodbye from Matt Domm.
Goodbye, mate.
It's a goodbye from Mr. Lampin, making a fantastic debut, I think it must be said.
Thanks very much for having me. Have a good night, everybody.
No worries. And it's a goodbye from me. Goodbye. And please, 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 come on, you Whites.